Hello and welcome to Master Gardening. I'm your host, Bud Qualk, and today we've got another great show for you. We're at my new house. I've got a brand new palette to work with and I'm all excited. So stay tuned. We'll be right back. One of the first things I did was build this fence to give us some privacy because there wasn't any. Plus, all around the edges, I can plant my flowers and it gives me a border for my bed. Along this bed, it was pretty well empty. There was a couple things. Weigelia was out of control and a couple other things. And the bed at the road back here was empty also. So I filled it all in with annuals and a few perennials, and I'll keep adding to it and adding to it. Maybe next year we'll get these things really looking well. A lot of the stuff that's in this bed is not going to stay in this bed. If you notice, I've got a lot of irises. I'll probably take 3/4 of those out of there and put them someplace else, but I had to have some place to put them, at least temporarily. Those irises came from the dryer family. These coneflowers came from the Petkoffs. The pots with the daisies came from Eileen Debenis Gray. People have been chipping in, and thank heavens I like that. And I like to have it's nice to have an idea that I got this here, I got that there, I got this whatever. And like I said, we got a bed around here that's really rough, and it'll look better next year, probably even next show. These grasses made it. They hadn't cut the grasses back. It was the middle of summer, and the grasses were dead, and they're big old clumps. And I didn't think they'd make it, but when I cut it all the way back to about maybe 6-8 inches, and it all came back beautifully. Matter of fact, I'm going to take some of this out of here and transplant it next spring. A lot of the ladybugs, they're really lady beetles, they're on there this time of year. Don't cut back your grasses as long as they're looking good. You know, it's, okay, this is dead, cut it back. No, as long as it's got some winter interest, and most of you guys know that. Okay, on past the grasses, there's some landscaping. A lot of the landscaping is still the same landscaping was here when they built the house. There are a lot of holes, and when they got a hole, for some reason they didn't fill it in. We got the boxwoods, we got nandinas, we got hollies, and right here's a problem right here. This river birch, and I've got a number of river birches, and almost all of them are dying. And the reason they're dying is a few years ago, somebody allowed somebody to haircut them and top them. I don't think they needed it, but maybe they did, but that'll kill a tree usually in 4 to 5 years if you don't do it right. Never top or haircut a tree unless maybe that's what you like. But most arborists will tell you that's against the law. You have good tree services, and you've got some that are just out to make a buck. If a tree service comes in and says, hey, let me top your trees, slam the door in their face. Topping trees is not something you want to do unless you like that. They look terrible in the wintertime. As a master gardener, I can't tell you what to do. It's your tree, but these trees are all dying, and I got to replace them. Right here, they put landscaping tarp down before they planted right in here. And now, after everything died, I've got to get that tarp and pull it up. It's in the way. Every time I get ready to plant something, I got a big piece of tarp I got to pull up. I planted a few things in here. They look pretty rough this time of year. Next year, I'll make this really look nice. I haven't had but maybe 8 months to plant so far. And here's proof of the topping a tree. It causes all these water sprouts, and these things, you'll see them all around my yard. They fall down. In the winter, when you have a lot of wind, we had a lot of wind this last week, and they're everywhere. If you know me, I had to have some vegetable beds. So I've got these 2 16-footers right here, one for tomatoes, one for peppers. I'll probably have 3 or 4 more before it's all over, but this is enough to get me started. One of the other things I use this bed for, and you can tell by looking at it, it's where I broke down some pots. I had a bunch of pots on the front porch and around. I broke them apart, left all the good stuff here, and this one's needs to be done. It's got some cuttings for the coleus. It's got some plants in the bottom. I'll try to save as many of those as I can. But that's where that is, and that's really good stuff right there. Okay, these are my tomato cages, and if you'll notice, this bed is 4 foot. It's 16 foot, but this is 4 foot by 8 foot, this section right here. And if you make these cages just perfect, they're 2 foot in diameter, So you can get 8 of them in here perfectly. And then the tomatoes intertwine and you don't have to worry about the wind blowing them over. These are the best cages I've ever had. They don't rust. I got this wire at Rural King, but you can get it at a lot of different places. You want to make sure these holes, some of these fences, the holes are real small and you can't get the tomatoes out. So this style right here has got plenty of big holes. And this one over here, it doesn't look like much, but it's got a little bit of color, so I'm leaving it. I think it's going to freeze tomorrow night and these marigolds will all be gone. But in the meantime, they don't look too bad. They leave a little color. And this is the last of my garlic. It's been in storage for 2 years. It went to California and back, and that's how much made it. I had a bunch of it, but that's how much I made it. So I've got my strain of garlic still going. Notice the leaves. I try to keep up on leaves. I don't like to use leaf blowers or leaf rakes. I use my lawnmower and I mow in a big circle. It crunches a bunch of them up, but it also puts them in a small pile, and then I can scrape them onto a sheet and then drag the sheet wherever I want to go with it. And here's the bed that I made along the house here. It wasn't here before and it looks really rough. I'll neaten it up next spring. And here's a bunch of perennials that people have given to me or I bought. I just stuffed them in there. Next spring I'll move them to where I want to move them. Hey, I also got a new shed. I got a new shed, a new wall, and a new greenhouse. That's a lot for 1 year. This mulch that's in here, this looks like mulch. It's not, it's compost. I got it at the compost center over on North 8th Street. If you have them scoop it in, they'll charge you to scoop it. Probably, I think it's about $15 a huge truckload. Good idea. It can be used as mulch, but it's not quite as, it doesn't hold up quite as good as real mulch. And of course, I got to feed the birds. We've had shows on birds before, but these sunflower seeds, you can't go wrong with them. Almost every single bird likes these small, get the small sunflower seeds. This is wild bird seed. It's waste. They don't eat it all. They drop most of it on the ground, but some of the birds, the smaller birds, they really like it. And the birds need water, even in the wintertime. That shoe didn't need to be watered. Okay, this is a strange plant right here. This is a crepe myrtle, believe it or not. It's a crepe myrtle bush. Never heard of it before. It's been here a while, it's huge, and I don't know if I'm gonna keep it or not, but I've got too many other projects going on to worry about cutting it out now. It doesn't look good in the wintertime, as you can tell pretty easily, but in the summertime, it's got these small, really nice leaves on it, and it's got these small crepe myrtle blooms all over the whole thing. So it's really pretty in the spring. I mean, in the fall. It blooms the same time as other crepe myrtles. But I don't know if I can take that big, huge plant that ugly in the wintertime. Okay, Dan, let's go around the side. This might end up being one of my favorite features right here. It's an arbor. This is a Don Juan climbing red, brilliantly dark red rose. There's not any, they're pretty well gone right now, spent. But this is highly recommended. So Don Juan rose, climbing rose, if you're out there and you're looking for one, Don Juan. When I got here, this had a weed vine growing on top of it. It was like 20 feet high on the top of this. It took me a whole weekend to get rid of that thing, but it's starting to look like something. I got to get some new caps on there. This was all blank all over here. This is where they had planted azaleas and a couple other shade-loving plants. Well, this gets sun all morning long and all early afternoon, so it wiped out all that stuff, especially the azaleas. There's some azaleas on the other side that made it, and they look really good. They're big. This is all brand new. These were zinnias. These little yellow flowers are zinnias. They told me they would be full size. They're not. They're miniature zinnias, but they still look pretty good. And they've bloomed like this solid all year long. I mean, you can't even find a dead one on there. Surely one dies every once in a while, but you can't tell it. All these irises along here, this Denny Dreyer and his lovely wife gave those to us. He's the king of irises. They're not going to stay there either. They're just there temporarily. I might leave a few of them, but they're going to move this next spring. These are knockout roses. You already figured it out. When I came, you could see this white lattice behind here, and it was from the street. It didn't look too good. I don't. The azaleas used to cover them up, I guess. These were little tiny pots this last spring, and this is how big they got. And they're not just knockout roses either. They're what they call doubles. It looks like inside you get all these different roses. A regular knockout just has a hollow dish, but this is a double. So if you're going to get knockout roses, think about getting the doubles. They're really good. Oh man. Okay. As we go down through here, there's some more of those, and this, I didn't plant this here. I guess some bird did. I don't know if it picked up some seeds or how it got here, but there's another couple of them along here too. I guess they just easily propagate from seeds. Like I said, this plant wasn't here, it just grew up on its own. That's a buddleia back there, the purple one. I love the butterfly bush, buddleia. And again, that thing in the spring was about 5 inches tall. And now it's really looking good. I'm gonna trim it up a little bit and make it look like something after the spring, when I see how the winter kill does. When you prune plants, you wanna make sure you prune them on shrubs after they bloom. So if it's an azalea or something that's blooming in the spring, that means it's blooming on old wood from last year. Azaleas bloom in the spring, prune them after they bloom. If you wait till the fall to prune them, you're pruning off all the new blooms for the next year. Crepe myrtles, things that bloom in the fall, always prune them in the fall. If you prune them and it's all right in the early spring too. But they bloom on new wood, wood that grew that year. It's called new wood. I'm pretty sure this is a belia, and they're usually small plants, maybe this big around. These are nice sized ones. They bloom all year long. They keep their leaves pretty good well in the wintertime, and that may be another of my projects. That looks like about a month job cutting these three out, and there's three on the other side that match these three. But they're really pretty plants. They're just so huge. They're out into the yard, and I don't know if I want to make the bed bigger or not. That's a choice I got, either cut them back or make the bed bigger. Okay, on this side over here, this is called a corkscrew willow, and most of you know what that is, and it's really very decorative. I had about 5 or 6 of them at my last house, and some of them were 30 or 40 feet tall. They're bad about losing some limbs too, like there's one right there, but if it's a lot bigger, you get a lot more limbs like that you'd lose. There's another one there, there's another one there, but that's okay. They're very decorative, and you can take and cut limbs off of them and put them in decorations or flower arrangements. And another thing you can do, and this is what I'm going to do this weekend, is cut these sprouts off a little bit, get these cut off so the limbs start up here, and propagate these things. You can usually just stick those in some mud next to the plant, and it'll take root. I'll probably put them in pots, and just a lot better chance of them surviving doing that, and they're convenient to move around and give away if you want to give them away to your friends. Some people want them and some people don't like them, but I love them. Let's go around the other side of the house where there's a bunch of shade. This is mostly the sun side of my house. Shades on the other side, that's where those azaleas survive finally. And I've got some hostas and some hydrangeas and things I want to show you over there. Angel trumpets. I've had angel trumpets my whole life. I love these things. They grow into trees in Florida, 40 foot tall. This was a pink one, and it got cold the other night, and I went ahead and took cuttings off of it. It's real easy to do, take cuttings. They hardly ever make it through the winter if it's very cold. You want to mound up a huge, huge mound around it so they can die back to the ground and come back up. It does that every once in a while if you're lucky. But I don't take a chance. I go ahead and take a bunch of cuttings, and they almost root 100%. And then you've got all new plants. This is what was left after I took cuttings. This is what it looked like before the cuttings. And this, you recognize one of my old tomato cages. It works really good for covering a plant like this too. We put a blanket over top of it, and we've made it, this is the middle of November, and it still made it. Look at all these dadgum blooms on here. These have all happened in the last maybe a month or so. It's kind of breaks your heart that it does all the blooming right at the end of the year like this. I even hate to cut it right now. But So I'll take a cutting like this. I'm gonna cut it off back here. Look at all those blooms, holy cow. Okay, first thing you gotta do is get rid of all the blooms, because they're not gonna, your cutting won't be able to handle a bloom. You don't have any roots, so you gotta compensate for the amount of leaves you take off. Okay, now I'm gonna make 2 out of this. This one may not make it because it's so small and it's so green. I'm gonna lay it down over here. But this one will make a good one right here. You want to cut right below a leaf node. That's where your roots are going to come out. Okay, and if you're going to cut it, make another cut down here, make another cutting, you want to cut below a leaf node and above a leaf node. Below, and we'll get into that later. Then you want to strip everything off. Strip all these limbs off, because your plant's not going to have any roots. That's where it gets its food and water. And if it doesn't have any roots, it's not going to be able to maintain too many leaves. Maybe more than that. Just leave a couple little ones. Okay, and that's what the cutting's going to look like. And if we've got time today, we'll do some dipping and sticking. It's called sticking when you stick a cutting. And I'll show you how to do that in the greenhouse if we have time today. If we don't, we'll get it next time. Okay, and this whole area right here was just whatever was in here is gone. It died. So I filled it all in with grasses, and these probably won't stay here, but it was a neat place to grow them, where the people coming along the road walking could see all the blooms and what have you. The spirea, if you can get a shot of the spirea down on the end down here, it really looked terrible. Everybody said, get rid of that spirea, get rid of that spirea. What you can do to that is cut it all the way back to the ground. When it dies it back, cut it all the way back to the ground so there's nothing left but a stub. And the next year it comes right back from the stub, and it's brilliant lime green. It's just one of the prettiest plants you ever want to know. It's starting to look a little rough right now, but if you do that, cut it all the way back, and that's as big as it'll ever get. It won't get real tall and lanky. Okay, let's go around the back of the house. I want to show you some pruning techniques. And we'll talk about pruning and cutting trees mainly trees. I'm asked all the time, when's the best time to prune? Well, it's never the perfect time to prune, but there are better times than others. If you want a generic time for everything, it would be late winter or early spring. If you're talking about shrubs again, I think we might have mentioned this, you prune after the bloom. On trees, the best time is when you have time. If you've got a few hours to do it and you're not going to have any time for a long time, then you do it when you have time. And you can prune year-round as long as you don't prune a whole lot. They say you can prune maybe a third of a tree off without killing it. Anything more than that, you're probably going to kill it. I wouldn't come close to a third. I mean, maybe a tenth or an eighth maybe at the most. That's really a lot of limbs off of a tree. Fall is the next best time to do it. Deep winter's next best. If you prune, you got to remember one thing. You're encouraging that tree to start reproducing again. So if you prune a tree in the fall or late summer, it's going to have a lot of new growth, which is probably not going to harden off quickly enough. And then the winter comes, it's going to kill that. It's going to have winter kill. So anything you get after that is going to be dead anyway. Okay, how do you prune? Next question. Well, you have the right tools. And all of you all have seen all these. This is just for really tiny things, maybe even flowers, roses, and then a little bit bigger for your pruners, your Felco pruners, and a little bit bigger you can use these scissor types, which this one's not in really good shape, but it does the job. I hate to throw away a tool that's working really well. And I use this also in conjunction with my pruner for my shrubs, my boxwoods, my hollies, and your softwoods. Use this to shape, and then after you do that, a lot of times you'll have some spikes come up. You hate to get this back out again and start all over again, so you can take this and just get a few of the little wild, crazy hairs instead of getting all that equipment back out again. Next thing up on the list is the loppers. This goes up to a little bit bigger limb and whatever you can handle. Some loppers are better than others. So if you find you can't get it with this lopper, there may make a lopper that's a little bit more leverage wise. This is a pretty good one right here. There's two different kinds of loppers. One's called a anvil lopper. It's a sharp edge that comes down on top of a flat anvil and smashes the heck out of the limb. I don't suggest that. I don't know who started that. These bypass pruners or loppers, they're like a pair of scissors. They have two edges, and the sharp edge goes right by the other one and it cuts it like a pair of scissors. That's what I recommend. They do pretty good. They all the way up to about 1 inch in diameter. After you get past that, my favorite tool in my bag is the pruning saw. This thing will cut a tree down if you want it to, but it'll wear you out. So anything 1 inch, 2 inches, 3 inches, this is the tool you want. And also it can get in that little crevice between limbs that the bow saw can't. I used to use a bow saw for everything. Back in the old days, bow saws were great. You had a big thick blade on that bow saw that wouldn't twist. I've hunted and I can't find a bow saw that has a blade big enough that it doesn't, when you get into the limb really well, that blade starts twisting on you and you can't control it. Bummer, 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 Dan. Okay, when that doesn't work, then you pull out the big equipment. This saw is almost, I'd say 45 years old. I've cut down hundreds of trees with it. The only thing I've ever done on it is sharpen the blade, which I probably have to do it because it looks like it's been in the dirt again. Okay, these are the tools. Now, what do? This tree right here was almost cut properly, but it wasn't. You never want to top unless you like top trees or haircut trees. You always want to cut back to the trunk. Cut every limb back to the trunk. If you don't, it might look good to you, but the tree doesn't like it. You're hurting the tree. You're really hurting, maybe even killing the tree if you don't cut that all the way back. The reason that is that trees don't heal. There's no such thing as a tree healing. It compartmentalizes. So if you make a hole in a tree, like a hole where a limb was, the tree tries to compartmentalize around that hole and seal it in where the bugs and the insects and the diseases can't get in. If it can't compartmentalize around that wound, then that's what happens. Insects and diseases get in and the tree has a chance of dying. Okay, I'm gonna light this off, Dan. This guy almost cut it back. I don't know why he didn't go ahead and do it. If you'll notice, there's a little crown right here on the limb. All these limbs have this little crown. Don't cut it into the crown. Cut it right at the base of that crown. When I said cut it back to the trunk, I told you something wrong. You don't go all the way back to the trunk, you just go back to the crown. Okay, let's give this a shot. Boy, that blade does need to be sharpened, Dan. Doggone it. I didn't realize how dull that thing was. Well, thanks for tuning in. This is my new house, and I'll keep you informed. We'll do some things in the greenhouse next time, I promise. Maybe make some tomato cages, show you how to do that. Fancy ones. This is Master Gardening. I'm your host, Bud Qualk. Until next time, good gardening.